The movie opens on an underground boxing arena. Frankie, the owner of a pub, has her sights set on Carter Ford because of his dominance in the ring. Another boxer, Elwood Dalton, enters the ring after Carter defeats his opponent. Carter, realizing who his next opponent is, immediately decides not to fight and ran off, scared. Dalton still gets paid without lifting a finger, since no one was willing to fight him. This piques Frankie's interest. A man stabs Dalton outside after he loses $500 in a bet, but he flees as soon as he realizes Dalton is not even slightly hurt. While Dalton is tending to his wound, Frankie approaches him and says she owns the Roadhouse, a bar in the Florida town of Glass Key. Dalton is given the offer to work as a bouncer for her, but he declines. Then Frankie gives him a card to call her if he changes his mind and decides to work for her. Dalton tried taking his own life by driving onto a train track while a train was coming fast. He changed his mind almost at the last minute and tries to move the car out of the way, but the car won't start. He then manages to get the car out of the way, but the train still destroys part of the car. He survives, but his car was totally trashed. That was when he decided to take Frankie's offer. Dalton shows up in the Glass Key. He meets Charlie, a young proprietor of a bookstore, and her father, Stephen. They point Dalton toward the Roadhouse and give him a free book. Before starting work, he arrives and greets Laura and Billy, two employees. Dalton observes at night as Billy and the other male staff members deal with unruly guys. Shortly after, a group of bikers led by Del shows in and starts torturing the customers and employees. Dalton gently tries to talk to Del, but all he does is irritate Dalton. He moves outside in the direction of the gang's motorcycles to entice them out before taunting Del. Before Dalton smacks him and knocks all the bikers down, he threatens to murder him. After that, Dalton takes the group himself to the hospital. A doctor named Ellie chastises him for bringing them there because they take up space from more deserving patients as he is leaving. Once he has won her over, she caters to his injuries. He was being watched by other members of the gang he put in the hospital as he leaves. Frankie alerts Dalton that there is a crocodile nearby when he is sleeping in a boat on the lake. Dalton has dreams while he sleeps about his final UFC battle. Arriving on a yacht owned by their master, crime lord Ben Brandt, are Del and his goons. They tell him about Dalton and how he used them to mop the floor. Dalton is a threat to Brandt's business in town, so he gives them orders to get rid of him by any means necessary. Dalton goes to visit the bookstore. He soon discovers that the people in the area recognize him right away and that other criminals flee from him. Billy and the other guys get advice from him on how to deal with aggressive customers. Dalton identifies one man who is carrying a concealed weapon, disarms him, and then kicks him out. Dalton meets Nurse Ellie again, when he's getting some food. On his way home from work after a long night, Del and his cronies try to run him over in Del's girlfriend's truck. Dalton is knocked off the bridge by them, but he lives. Del is waiting for him with a gun when he gets home. Once more, Dalton fights him and throws him into the sea. Dalton tries to save Del, but not before the crocodile devours Del. Charlie later tells Dalton about the dubious activities taking place in the area. Dalton resists a pair of Brandt's henchmen who try to drag him along after he leaves the bookstore by breaking the fingers off the one pointing a gun at him. Even Brandt's criminal father Gerald, who is incarcerated, discovers that Dalton is a difficult opponent. Gerald calls his most vicious and hardened goon, Knox, telling him to go to Glass Key and deal with Dalton. This occurs after Knox has an affair with a married woman, marches into a street in Italy while nude, attacks a man for his jacket, and sets a store on fire. When Knox gets to Brandt's house, he informs him that his father hired him, which causes some discontent among Brandt and his fellow crooks. Ellie takes her ex's boat out into the water for a date with Dalton. She informs Dalton that she is aware of his background, which he has been attempting to conceal from everyone. He tries to leave Ellie, but she persuades him to stay, and they share a kiss. Later on, Joaquin Dalton as Sheriff Big Dick and his shady police officers find Dalton. Dalton is threatened and ordered to leave town by the sheriff, but he refuses. The police then begin to beat Dalton, and just as Dick is about to put him to death, Ellie arrives and gives him a smack. Telling Dalton that Dick is her father, she brings him along. Furthermore, he is working with Brandt in collusion. Ellie then informs Dalton, quite seriously, that he must get out of town. In another scene, two of Brandt's men are seen watching the bookstore, and after a while gets out of the car with a gallon of gasoline and a crowbar to beat up Charlie, and her father, Stephen. Then burn the bookstore down. Brandt appears at the roadhouse that evening and walks up to Dalton. He begins to make fun of him for his previous UFC experience. It turns out that Dalton quit the organization because he killed his opponent in the ring despite the referee calling the fight, and Dalton has been plagued by this memory ever since. Brandt departs, and Knox shows up to cause mischief. Dalton intervenes after he starts beating on Billy and the other guys. Dalton finds Knox to be a struggle, but in the end, Knox is taken aback by Dalton's ability to bounce back from a beating. Ellie shows up on the scene to offer medical assistance. Dalton prepares to leave town. He observes the bookstore has been set on fire by Brandt's thugs, Sam and Vince. This made him angry and he goes back. Dalton is informed that Charlie and Steven are still alive and well at the hospital. When he finds Vince, he confronts him with a gun before Dalton hits him in the throat, rupturing his trachea and causing him to eventually suffocate. As Dalton disposes of the body, he spots Mo, the least evil of Del's gang members. He informs Dalton about an early morning meeting that Brandt and his henchmen are planning to attend. When Dalton walks along the ocean, he sees one of Dick's dishonest sheriffs lugging a heavy case full of cash onto a boat. In order to frame the deputy for Vince's killing, he knocks the deputy unconscious and places Vince's body next to him. After locating Dalton, the sheriff tells him that Brandt abducted Ellie. He borrows a boat to go meet Brandt and save Ellie. When Dalton arrives aboard Brandt's yacht and discovers Dick is with him, he is able to deduce that Dick enticed him onto the vessel on purpose, but Brandt acknowledges that he actually did abduct Ellie. Dalton blows up the boat he landed in, which belongs to Ellie's ex, to confuse everyone before the thugs can gather around him. As a result, the boat begins to sink, and Dalton finds Ellie after beating the shit out of the thugs. She and Dalton burst through the window and escape. As Ellie is being taken by Brandt aboard a speedboat, Knox arrives in a skiff boat and attempts to kill Dalton. Dalton boards Knox's boat and fights and throws him into the water, but he holds onto the rope. Dalton then goes after Brandt. After a struggle with Brandt, Dalton crashes the motorboat near the roadhouse, launching Brandt onto the rooftop. Knox, in the meantime, exits the water, robs a vehicle, and causes it to collide with the roadhouse. The two then begin to fight, with Knox showing to be a beast once more. Brandt insists that he kills Dalton, but Knox snaps his neck instead because he can no longer stand him. However, Dalton gets the better of him and takes him out by stabbing him repeatedly with wooden shards until he is unconscious. Arriving, Dick offers to fill in for Dalton as a token of appreciation for saving Ellie. Before he goes, she and Dalton exchange one final glance. Frankie, Billy, Laura, and the others begin in an attempt to repair the damage to the roadhouse without closing for business. Dalton visits the bookstore as he's about to depart and runs into Charlie and Steven there again. He bids them farewell and hands over the cash bag he got from the deputy. After that, Dalton boards a bus to go to his next location. During the credits, it is revealed that Knox survived the fight. After giving all the physicians a tough time, he leaves the hospital wearing just a gown. The end.